some reason they are actually stable. They get through and they move ahead.
That is good.
Mm.
That's good. That's good. These are horrendous times, I think. Yeah. The, I empathize with the young students, the medical students, the residents. It's a very distressing time.
Not quite. It's a part of growing.
Yeah, I guess so. I was teaching last week, and I was teaching about taking clinical history, and I was asking people to put on the chatbots recent symptoms they've had that so to use that as a practical example. And so many put quite a number of the symptoms they put there were clearly COVID, COVID
Hi,
infection.
Prof. How are you?
Very well, Simon. How are you?
Very good, very good. I'm co-moderator. There's a young girl called Doris Wamboi
Yes.
who is was running a little late, but I think I will start soon.
And they are participants.
No, participants will let in after we have ensured that your slides can move. So from about in the next maybe 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay.
The participants are already.
Okay, that's encouraging. I thought we were just going to talk among ourselves.
No. We then Manda, speak. Are you able to hear anything? Prof. Manda, we are testing the system.
Very well.
Very good. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Nice to see you in good health. Nice to see you in good health.
No, you are only seeing a photograph.
Oh,
No, we can see you real. We can see you live.
because we can hear your voice, then we are okay. Very good. I think
Yeah.
we Peter.
By the way, Simon, have you taken your parents for COVID vaccine?
Yes, Dr.
I told them to go to Pumwani. Peter, where is Okeo?
I sent them the list, but the participants are already in.
Okay. We are going to start in a few then.
Yeah.
Yeah, give us exactly 2 minutes, then we start. Yeah.
Okay. So as I was saying, Prof. Wanda, I found a lot of them were actually talking about the symptoms of
Prof. Ndwati,
Yes.
participants are in, so Prof. Manda mtaongea baadaye. So
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
Thank you to all participants who are logging in. We will be beginning in the next 2 minutes as we wait for 1 or 2 more participants. And thank you for logging in this early morning. We'll try to make sure your weekend is worth it. Thank you again for logging into today's webinar. Today's webinar is a research clinic program. And our research clinic subtopics for today are will be presented to us by 3 eminent scholars in Kenya. So our speakers today will be Professor Ruth Ndwati, who will take us through tools to improve quality of scientific writing. And then we will have Professor Jackson Nyarongi Ombui from after the professor's talk, and his subtopic will be scientific writing, preparing a journal manuscript for publication. And thirdly, and towards the tail end, we'll have Professor Walter Mwanda, who will be talking about the mentor's role in modeling scientific writers. This webinar is a series brought to you by the East African Medical Journal in partnership with the KMA Committee, on Research and Development. And in the line, we have Dr. Chafasto Obonyo, who is a convener of the committee that is spearheading research at the Kenya Medical Association. And I would like him to make 1 or 2 statements before we proceed to our topics. Joining us later will be the editor-in-chief of East African Medical Journal, Professor Okeo, and then we want to start our program thereafter. Chafasto.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kigondo. I don't know if I'm audible.
You're audible, yes. You're very audible. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Really much appreciation to Professors Ndwati, Mwanda, and Professor from VetMed, who'll be presenting today. Welcome again, everyone, to this webinar. I think we are doing a series of this with the East Africa Medical Journal with the aim of improving our standard of research amongst ourselves and increasing the level of publications that we can get. I won't take much of your time. I just want to say welcome again and hand back over to Kigondo to invite the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chafasto. Dr. Chafasto is doing a fantastic job at Kenya Medical Association and is bringing the research back to the association. And soon you will be seeing a lot of presentations from that. There's a bit of change in the program, and Jackson Nyarongi Ombui has asked to present last. Therefore, Professor Mwanda, you be ready to present after Professor Ndwati. Our moderator today is a young doctor called Dr. Doris Wamboi, who will be joining us soon, and will be introducing Professor Mwanda and the last speaker. As you know, the COVID situation has made traveling between counties slightly tricky, but she will be joining us soon and introducing. So I want to start off by introducing my mentor, Professor Ruth Ndwati. Professor Ruth Ndwati is a professor of pediatrics at the School of Medicine, College of Health Sciences, University of Nairobi. She is a pediatrician by training and an epidemiologist who has taught at the University of Nairobi for many years. She has had many achievements. Her major achievements being her contribution to understanding the epidemiology and biology of breast milk transmission of HIV in the integration of prevention to mother and child transmission of HIV in resource-constrained settings. I'm proud to have been part of that study, a famous Keshobora study that brought a heart into PMTCT. She is also currently the leading an interdisciplinary program through the University of Nairobi of Medicine to educate physician research to best implement HIV treatment and prevention methods, backed by Research EMJ. Her CV is several pages long, and we will not go through it. But today we want to welcome Professor Ndwati, and I think she is with us on the line, and we are very privileged to have her in this research series. Professor Ndwati, I think you can now take us through tools to improve the quality of scientific writing. And I must say this is very important. And after this, we need to escalate this to mashinani in the counties where a lot of the scientific writing is not taking place, but a lot of work is taking place. And I think the interface between the universities and the county referral hospitals and all dispensaries and health centers is an important, should be an important output of these webinar series from the East African Medical Journal. Over to you, Professor Ndwati.
Thank you very much for the very generous introduction. I must acknowledge that I feel honored to be making this presentation on a platform of East African Medical Journal, the best journal in this region. I also feel honored to be sharing the platform with Prof. Mwanda. For those who may not know, we met in med school. I think we had met before that in high school at a debate, at a school debate. But we met in med school, and I'm proud to say that we have shared a professional lifetime together. Prof takes care of many children who suffer from cancer, and as you have heard, I'm a pediatrician. So, Prof, I'm happy to be on this platform with you. Thank you. So let's go. I've set my slides. So if you, whoever is projecting could just start off. I promise I will not give you a very difficult or very data-full presentation. This is really just a sort of a roadmap on how to, how to get published and how to have a good quality paper. So if we could move to the, do you want me to share my screen? I present myself. I'd send the slides to Thingy. Maybe let me just share.
Yes, share the screen. Share the screen, Prof. Share the screen. It's much easier. But you move, please.
My laptop is a bit mosaic, so sometimes the slides fail to move. So I may not be able, we'll try presentation mode, but if they don't move, then we'll just do it, move.
They are very clear. You can put it on full slide share.
Yes.
Presentation. Yes, that is fantastic. We can see.
So that's a title, Tools to Improve the Quality of Scientific Writing, and a presentation at this clinic. Now let's see. Tell me, did my slides move? That's where.
Yes, they moved very well. Objectives we can see.
Okay, so it's just briefly to review purpose of scientific publication, highlight some of the common errors observed, and introduce tools to improve quality of writing. You may find that by the end of the day, there may be some overlap from one talk to the other, but I think the overlap is good because it just helps us to do a better job. The selection of what I will speak is informed on my experiences in reviewing articles for the East African Medical Journal. I'm one of those silent faces behind the reviews. You can see my next slide, I hope. The purpose, yes, the purpose of scientific publication is to improve the practice of medicine. The message carried out in an article should be clear and have the potential of improving the practice of medicine and implementation. Now, an unstated benefit, and I say this because I think there are many of you who may be at a stage where you are trying to get your master's dissertation published or your PhD, your 2 papers requirement for PhD, as you know now, with the universities and with the Commission of University Education, is putting great emphasis on writing and scientific communication. An unstated benefit of sending an article to a journal is it helps to improve the quality of the research that you're doing. It actually expands the panel that that mentors you as you complete your studies. Recently, I was supervising a PhD, and the student was doing some very advanced biostatistics, which I think at some level, even the faculty who are statisticians who are mentoring him may not necessarily have been at the cutting edge of the field, and by just sending to a scientific journal, the reviews we got back helped to make that paper really good. So I want to encourage you to see the journal, and particularly the East African Medical Journal, that we are an extension of that mentorship panel that will help you to have good science and good research to inform quality of inform practice of medicine in our population. Okay, then, so who is sending us journal articles? We receive articles from Kenya, of course, and Africa at large. And I think it's always an honor to see the articles from other parts of Africa, and to actually see what the kind of problems that they're having, many of them very similar to our own. We receive a lot of papers from early career researchers. So as I said, master's level, especially the MA dissertations, some PhD level dissertations, but we are also starting to see some undergraduate research. And I think this is speaks of the efforts the universities are making to increase exposure to research among undergraduate medical students. And then, of course, we get seasoned research from universities and research institutes sending us papers. I've reviewed recently some work from some colleagues from University College London. So the East African Medical Journal is a good place to send your papers. Now, as we talk about improving improving quality of publication, we should also say what are reasons for rejection. And I think one is lack of originality, lack of significant scientific message, especially to a more general medical readership. And then very important is poorly crafted work. Now, if your problem is in writing the article, but the scientific work, the conduct, there's integrity in the scientific work you've done. So your research work was done well, the methods were correct, and the work is credible. Many of the reviewers of this journal will work with you to improve the crafting of the journal article. But if the conduct of the study does not meet the standard, so the research design is flawed, we will reject your work. We have a commitment to making sure that whatever is published, there is integrity. Remember that when a medical a journal publishes a paper, it may be the basis of clinical practice by whoever has read it, and maybe it's addressing the issues they are facing. So it's very important that we have good good research design, that our work can be replicated and it is accurate. Now, a journal is as good as the papers it receives. So we want to encourage those who are sending us papers to do a good job, hence this particular workshop. And this goes not just the design, even the language. We need to pay attention to how we present how we write, how we tell the story is important at this stage as much as the science that we are presenting. And I say this because I've reviewed paper articles where there are bullet points, there are dashes here, there are abbreviations so thrown all over the place. Like somebody was doing notes, like we write notes in the words. But I'm saying that for a journal article and for our generation protecting the reputation of our journal, we must pay attention to our writing styles. And if you don't have good writing, and a good test of whether you're communicating is to have somebody who is not in the field, and sometimes who is not even a medic, to read what you've written and see whether they actually understand, whether you're actually communicating the message. And I'm sure the other speakers will emphasize that particular point. Now, what are your most important resources as you prepare your article? And I have just 2 points here. One is the specific journal requirements. And the second is the recommendations for the conduct, reporting, editing, and publication of scholarly work in medical journals. And we have a current update in 2019. I must confess that on our website, we've referenced the 1963 article, which was the original one. The editors of East African Medical Journal have participated in the workshops that have updated those particular guidelines, and these are the current one. It used to be a very long document. It's now 19 pages, very precise. And I really urge you to read it and to use it as your handbook as you write your scientific article. Now, the specific journal requirements are important because every house has the way it does its business, and we at the East African Medical Journal have this our style. If you're going to publish in another journal, say BMS or PLOS ONE, they have different requirements. But having said that, there are core requirements, there are core standards, global standards, core requirements that apply across the board for whichever scientific journal you're applying to write to. And these are very well encapsulated in this reference that I've posted here. I did not meet this reference until I was actually writing a scientific article, after you've done all the research and everything. But this is something to read even as you start on the journey of conducting a research study. Now, I'll speak a little bit, since I was the first speaker, I thought it's important I speak a little bit about the opportunities we offer at the East African Medical Journal. You can publish an original paper. The original articles should report data from original research, which is relevant to the practice of medicine, especially in Kenya, the African continent, and other developing country settings. So we are interested in publishing original work that is relevant to the environment at which we are working. That's our first priority. We also give opportunities for review articles. And this is a great opportunity for the more senior people who are, who are gurus in the area of specialization. But we do require that the review must have a critical analysis of the review subject. It must give a state of the art on the subject. It must be balanced, presenting different viewpoints on the issues, including the controversies, and would prefer that this kind of review is contributed by authorities and experts in the respective field. As people are scrambling to improve their curriculum vitae around promotions into associate professor and professorships, I think this is a good opportunity, and a good opportunity of sharing the experience that you have over the many years of practice. Now, there are other opportunities. For example, the editorials. These are usually commissioned. The journal would ask for an editorial, but you can also send in an unsolicited communication, but that will go through a peer review process. Case reports are also important, and the journal actually will publish case reports. They must be authentic. They must be, the writing must be adequate and appropriately illustrated. And you must, of course, make sure that the identity of the individual is concealed, especially if you're presenting photographs, and you must meet the minimum ethical requirements. Now, many important conditions were first reported as a case report or as case series. For example, HIV, which is famous, it was the report of PCP pneumonia in young men. You didn't expect PCP pneumonia in young men. And there are many other case reports. Case reports are also, I think, a good opportunity for entry-level researchers. Maybe you're an intern or a medical officer working out there and find an interesting case, and it's an opportunity to review the management or the investigations that are required for such as a case. Then we have this called letters to the editor. Usually, this is an opportunity for people to comment on the journal articles that have been presented, and we prioritize those that have been published within the last 4 months, and they'll be edited. But a letter to the editor can also be a point of introducing some new information. Okay. Our journal offers an opportunity also of writing history, and we do this by having a panel, being able to write in an obituary. Very unfortunately, in the recent past, we have lost very big names in the practice of medicine. An obituary is a good way of, in a professional magazine, documenting that these individuals and highlighting their achievements. And I'd like to urge us to remember to do this. It's very interesting to go back and read old editions of the East African Medical Journal, and sometimes you see an obituary and probably have been doing a procedure that was developed by that particular individual. It brings a connection that is important. It's important that we are also part of writing the history of medicine and not just reading about the Osler and others who contributed many years ago. So those are the opportunities. We clearly state what the structure of the original article and reviews should be. It is very important as you write your article, you read the information provided by the journal on how the article should be presented. And for original articles, we use this AIM radar format, and that's what it is represented: an abstract, an introduction, materials and method, results, discussion, acknowledgements if they are there, and references. But please note that every journal has slight variations on this. So finding out before you, as you decide which journal to send your paper to, and read that so that you don't waste time and you don't increase the likelihood of being rejected upfront because you just didn't follow the format. Now, the structure of the abstract when you write an original article is different from when you do a review article. And here I just give the example. Sorry, I'm going too quickly. I hope my slides are still moving.
They're moving very well.
Okay, good. Sometimes when I'm teaching in class, they fail to move. Eh? Yeah, but I'm happy they're doing so now. So the abstract for an original article is different from the one for a review article. So again, you need to ask to read and find out what kind of article am I writing, and structure your abstract appropriately. The abstract is very important. It needs to have enough information so that people know what you're communicating. Many individuals will not read the whole journal article, or even the decision to read the whole journal article will be based on what you present in the abstract. It is more difficult to write an abstract than to write the lengthy journal, because here you even have a word limit on what you should present. The approach we use as we in the department I work and where we are helping to train our professionals on scientific writing, is that it's good to start with an abstract. When you're writing your paper, start with the abstract. It forces you to think through exactly what you did, and to put it in the fewest words possible. But once you structure your abstract, it also helps you to structure the rest of the paper. And then, of course, once you've written the rest of the paper, your discussions, your results, you need to come back then and review your abstract and ask yourself, does the abstract match what I've written? I have seen papers sent in, and the abstract is different from the actual journal article. The East African Medical Journal is very generous in terms of the words it allows you to write. So you have plenty, it gives you plenty of opportunity to communicate. So the abstracts are usually 250 words. There's a summary for case report is 100 words. But if you look at the original article, you can write a paper up to 4,000 words. You can have as many as 8 tables or illustrations, and you can have we limit the references to 20. This works out very well for the kind of if your research has been like a dissertation, you probably have done a lot, written a lot. It allows you to be able to summarize that into a paper and not lose too much of the detail that it enriches the work that you're presenting. The reviews are, again, 2,000 to 4,000 words. Again, the same limits in terms of illustrations. Your case report can be 1,000 words, which is, again, a lot of words for describing one case. And then the letter to the editor, 800, editorials, 800, and the obituary is 400. And there are details of how to do it. So this is a good opportunity. This is a good journal to send that piece of work that you spent many days, many hours working on, particularly as your MA dissertation or your PhD thesis. If it is your first journal article, do a good job. There are many of us who only write one paper in their lifetime. So that one paper that you get published, please do a good job. Take time and prepare it well. Now, there are issues of authorship, and ideally should include the people you've worked with, and there's a criteria. Were they part of the conception and design or analysis and interpretation of the data? Did they participate in the drafting or revising it critically for important intellectual content? And see the final approval of the version being published. So don't send an article that you haven't gone back to the co-authors for agreement. And the conditions A, B, and C must be met. Now, the person who pays for the research study does not necessarily qualify to be an author. Okay, you cannot buy yourself into a journal article, into a scientific journal article. And as you send in the article, the person who's the lead writer must ensure that the criteria is met. You take being the communicating author, you take these responsibilities. And ideally, the authors should sign. The only time that they may not sign is if it's posthumous. The references are an issue. This is an issue I found as a challenge when I'm reviewing papers. Only references which are clearly related to the author's work should be quoted. I should add that please do not reference a paper you have not read. You must have read the article, the whole article in detail. Just reading the abstract is not enough. You shouldn't take that shortcut. And then, of course, then there's a style of referencing. It should be numbered consecutively in the order in which they appear in the text. That is the East African Medical Journal requirement. The many universities are using the AMA referencing where they do alphabetical order. We do not use alphabetical order for the East African Medical Journal. It is in numbering. And then at the end, you should have your list of references. You give the name of the author, their last name, and then their initials. The journal says if there are more than 6 authors, then you will list the first 6 and then say the et al. Okay. Now, the way you reference a journal, there's also a detail. There's every journal has the way it is abbreviated, and that there's also a style of arranging the the year, volume, and we use what we call the Vancouver style. There are other styles. We use the Vancouver style. And similarly, the references for the books are also clarified. Okay, that reference, I said, the ICGME document clarifies this very well for the authors. Now, this section, I want us. This is how do you report? And over the last maybe 20 years, there's emerged what we call the reporting guidelines, and they give guidelines of how you report studies based on their study design. It helps the author to describe the study in enough details so that when you evaluate it, whether it is by editors, reviewers, readers, and others, they're able to judge the quality of the study and be able to gauge whether this study is worth publishing or not. Now, the same is encouraged when you do a review article. There are standards for that. The systematic reviews have a mandatory checklist that you must use. This is important. It's a way of helping us to standardize how we report and a way of improving the quality of the studies that we are publishing. We do not say specifically that you must use these checklists for the East African Medical Journal, but I cannot promise you that we won't change tomorrow and insist, but we do comply with the general guidance for publication of medical journals. So please pay attention to these checklists. The checklists are the consort, which is used for randomized trials, the strobe, which is used for observational studies, whether cross-sectional, cohort studies, case control studies. Even there's one for case reports. Then we have Prisma for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Just the concept, the randomized trials are clear. You are randomized people to intervention A or B, or sometimes you have a complex randomization where you expose people to different interventions. The cross-sectional survey is obvious what it is. You go and do a survey. Cohort studies are those studies where you identify people on the basis of their exposure. Case controls are those you identify people on the basis of whether they have a disease or not. Now, over the last maybe actually 20 years has been the emergence of what we call systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Now, the people who do these studies do not go to the ground and collect original data. Their business is to look at your studies, the ones you have gone to the ground and collected data, and now go through them and review them. They're like examiners. It's like an exam, and determine whether what was the quality of the study that you did. And the meta-analysis particularly are useful in that you may have done a study, you made an observation, but your sample size was small. You didn't have the resources to have a very large study. Some events are fairly rare. So even if you tried, you'd have to take a whole lifetime to collect enough data. So the principle is to bring in together various studies which have of observations, various small studies, and do this meta-analysis to try and get a better estimate of the risks and the confidence intervals. And while the systematic reviews are very much about doing the same, but also commenting on the quality of the studies that have been done. Now, it is a requirement that before your research findings from, say, a randomized trial or observational study become standard of practice and appear in a WHO guideline, that they must be subjected to this systematic review and meta-analysis. And if you look at standard WHO guidelines, they usually will say there's good evidence here, or the strong recommendation, but the evidence is weak. This is related to the judgment that was made when the systematic review was done on that particular subject. So it's important as we conduct our studies, we try and have good quality work, because then we can feed into the guidelines that are being made. And then the last one is around a standard for diagnostic accuracy. When you do, for example, in diagnosis of malaria, when you do a rapid diagnostic test and people report on the developers of the lab test, or even a clinical assessment tool, when they report on the sensitivity, specificity of that tool, there are standards they must have observed in the quality, in the conduct of the study that informs that outcome. And the standard checklist is related to that. So what do we say? That it's not enough that you do the study, but you must do the study according to the standard. You must meet a minimum standard for your study then to reach a point where it is actually even published. Here I give an example of the consult checklist. It's the one that is used for reporting clinical trials. And I would say, and I recommend to my students, that you should really use these checklists, not just at writing the paper, but you should use it in the design of the study. When you're designing your study, you should have the end in mind. I will want to write an article. This is how I should use it. And I would say that these checklists are very important tools. They are giving you almost like a recipe of how to do a good quality study. And you can see how they are organized. They tell you exactly how you should put your title, your introduction, your methods, and the intervention, and or even how they're asking you how you did the blinding. So if you read them before you design your study, you will address yourself to all these points. And when it comes to writing, you will have a great paper. The quality of your results will be good. You have a great paper, and your research work will be the basis of improving medical practice. So these checklists are really a very, very important resource for us. The ones there when we started research, and we grappled in the dark, but there's a light on top of the hill now. And the sources of those reporting guidelines, there are two references. They create a network. It's open access, and it has those resources and the checklist. And some journals actually require you to attach a checklist ticking that you have actually addressed all those points in the article. And then, of course, the NIH resources. And these resources are important. If you want to spend time in as a researcher, or even the occasional research, it's worth spending some time reading these resources. They'll help to improve your knowledge and skills around this. Now, I want to highlight other issues around quality of study, and I picked up this from the ICGMA issue. There's an issue of measurements, and how do you report the measurements? And things like length, height, weight, and volume are always reported in metric units. Okay. If it is temperature, it's degrees Celsius. If it's blood pressure, it is in millimeters of mercury. Now, journals may vary the units they use for clinical chemistry and other measures. So you need to read the journal requirements so that you get it right. Failure to do this, have accurately measure, report your measurements, can get your paper rejected, you know. The most journals use the international systems units, but sometimes some journals, especially the older journals that have been around for a long time, they have an old methodology that they use, they continue to use that, okay? And drug concentrations may be reported in either SI or mass units, but any other alternative that you use should be in parentheses where appropriate. Now, your tables. This is also usually a challenge. Tables are very important. You can capture a lot of information very concisely. And in fact, you can provide detail in the table that you will not provide in the text. But the text must be detailed enough to stand on its own apart from the table. Now, you need to prepare the tables according to the journal requirements. And you need to name the tables consecutively, okay, as they appear in the journal. Pay attention to the titles of the journals, the title of the columns in the journal. First of all, the title of the tables, but also the columns. Pay attention to their titles. This say yes, no, it's not sufficient. You must ask yourself, what does that column represent? And remember that the person who's reading it wasn't there when you did the study. And if you have explanatory notes, they should be in the footnotes. Eh? Now, the footnotes are used to explain all non-standard abbreviations and or even other explanations around your table. You use symbols to explain the information if needed. And what you need to note is that the symbols may vary from journal to journal and in the order of use, okay? And they may be alphabet or they may be mathematical symbols. So check the journal's instructions for authors for required practice. And if there isn't if there's not a specification, then the default is your ICGME guidelines, okay? And also check how things like what the journal wants. Do they want standard deviation or do they want standard errors when you're describing the means? Again, every journal has its own methodology. So when in doubt, the default is these recommendations for the conduct and reporting, editing, and publication of scholarly medical journals. The current edition, as I've said, is 2019. It is 19 pages. It's an easy read, and it's a good investment. I think that's my last slide, and I hope I've given you a snapshot of where to get some of the resources to help improve the quality of your journal articles, some of the issues that you actually need to pay attention to, and to remind you that the quality of our East African medical journal is as good as the authors who are sending in their articles. And as a reviewer, I must say I'm committed to supporting the people who submit to have a good paper. And to share the science and that addresses the issues in our region. So thank you very much for the opportunity to have given this brief presentation.
Thank you very much, Prof. Even 20 years down the line, I'm still learning. I thought I knew it all, but thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. And to the participants here, I think you would put your questions on the Q&A. I'm hoping that you, Prof, are you engaged elsewhere?
No, I'll stay.
Thank you very much, because I want to combine your questions with those of Prof. Mwanda. And I'm hoping Prof is also on the line, Prof. Walter Mwanda. Prof, are you on the line? Prof. Mwanda, are you on the line? I want to bring you in, Prof. Mwanda.
Yes,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Just to make it in this Zoom era, you never know. You need to ensure. So I think you'll go in next because Prof. Jackson Ombui is will come in slightly later. I'll introduce you, then you can share your slides. Are you able to share your slides? Thank you very much. So Prof. Walter Mwanda is an associate professor of the University of Nairobi, Department of Human Pathology, section of Hematology and Blood Transfusion. He's a council member and chairman of the Consortium for National Health Research in charge of hematology and oncology clinical services at the Kenyatta National Hospital in charge of pediatric oncology. And of importance, he's an East African Medical Journal reviewer, and he has provided a lot of support to the journal over and above all the other treatment protocols he has done. I was a student of him, I think over 30 years ago. So you can see the wealth of experience that we have here. And today he will discuss mentorship. And I think you can have a go, Prof. Mwanda. After this, we will take your questions and those of Prof. Ndwati, and then proceed to Prof. Ombui. The floor is yours. You can project and put on full mode.
Yeah, thank you so much. If I put it on full mode, it may not be able to move as such. So I think you'll bear it with me.
No problem. You can return it to the one we were able to see previously.
Are you able to see?
Yeah, that's fine.
You are able to see, that's fine.
That is fine. Okay, yeah.
Yes, just a slight correction on my CV. I've been a full professor for over 12 years. As Ndwati told you, we were classmates and we share very many things in common. It's so surprising the way she talks. It's almost exactly the way I'm likely to talk. So don't be surprised. As I said, first of all, we were actually prefects and captains when we were in our high school, and that's where we met first. And then from first year to sixth year to the medical school to postgraduates. Let me most sincerely thank the East African Medical Journal for giving me this opportunity to say something that I think is very dear to my heart. I always remind everybody else, and particularly those who are my peers and younger, what Mother Teresa said, that a life lived not for others is probably not as enjoyable. The best way to lead a life for others is to provide them with opportunities to see through what they want to be. And in this era of competition, it is only right that those who have had a chance to go through, have had a chance to live it, should be able to give that chance back, particularly to the young ones. And that's why mentors' role in modeling scientific writer and writers is an apt topic, although it may not flow as much as I would have wanted it, but the message is clear in the topic that I have. Why successful scientific writing over the ages have had their basis in the past, present, and the future. As my colleague did say, she said so much, but then one would wonder, should I read about how to write to a journal, or should I go right ahead and do the writing of the manuscript? The midway between is to have mentoring, because it does encompass and provides for all these attributes. The recipient of mentorship is a mentee. I must say the word mentee is in quotes. The mentor is not in doubt, as you shall see in a few minutes. Attributes that are required to have the how, to uptake, how to succeed. The past is the literature that is available for research and writing on manuscript. The present is the knowledge and skills one may have and continue to gather. The future is the research question, the hypothesis, the goals that one would want to develop. Therefore, developing a fruitful scientific writing culture is a culmination of these attributes. Pointers to needing a mentor is to start, first of all, by considering how to quickly assume, attain, have illustrated these attributes. But when you plunge in and submit a paper to a journal, and you receive a reviewer's remark that a topic is interesting, but requires significant rewrites, and notes areas of concern to you, particularly introduction is poorly developed. There is incoherence in literature, that your method is not clearly presented. Results not in tandem with the discussion, and the information which you have provided are extraneous to what you intended to put through. This type of presentation sells the needs to have scientific writing, mentoring, and modeling. These attributes and potential to have your paper manuscript rejected should not be the push to have a mentor. Mentoring is a process. It's a lifetime process. And I'm told that mentors don't die. Some of us had some of the greatest mentors. In mentoring, there's usually a more senior and experienced person that takes up a less experienced person, a mentee, through the phases and steps to ensure the intended success. There are certain terminologies which may be confused with the mentor and mentoring. Mentoring is simply to take you where you want to be because I've been there. I've been through the hills and the valleys, through the challenges, through the sweetness of the fruits. And if you want, I can take you there. That relationship is not only beneficial to the development of the mentor, but also to the mentee. Just see how sweet it is to have a young man, a young lady next to the old one. And I always joke with my students and my young workmates that we are now the fathers and the mothers of the profession. The time they spend in the universities, the time they spend starting their work, starting their career, is better illustrated by us and by those who have been through that. And in that, a level of convergence occurs. Characters which reflect what you want to be, which finally develops into a needed culture. I'm told, and I'm convinced after listening to my colleague, that one needs to have a culture. In as much as journals may be different, as much as institutions may be different, the culture of writing would be the same. Mentoring is a critical aspect of not only professionals, but also for personal development, and particularly those budding to be scientific writers. A mentor is a medium for growing together with each other in skills and knowledge and positive attitude to be able to achieve quality goals. My colleague dwelt at length at the need to have quality. Once one is intending to do that, you need to have a description, a borders, a shoulder to hold on to achieve quality goals in writing publishable manuscripts. It's a tool to deliver the core values through structured instructions at various levels during the pursuit of such goals. It's time spent wanting to be a researcher and a scientific writer. It's a period to acquire these characteristics, attributes, and culture to be one. A mentor is actually a role model. A role model to emulate. It is an truism that young people usually do not automatically take up what is vocalized to them. They tend to identify more with people who appear to have certain attributes and emulate their behavior, their character, and their culture. Most people do not learn values from having them preached to them. Sorry to use the word preaching. The preferred mode of learning is seeing values enacted in a way that would suit the young, the novice, and the intending writer. Values are best transmitted through deeds, not generally through words. Therefore, role models in scientific writing tweaked with mentoring and mentorship are likely be more successful in modeling a mentee. A mentor has, of course, had to have certain characteristics. A mentor is one who has made up his mind to a potential mentee. They must have observed the mentee and they are able to devote helping colleagues write scientific papers, review manuscripts. In other words, a mentor to a mentee must show passion in what he or she wants the mentee to be. More importantly, in academia and research, mentors' intellectual and scholarly style exhibited when he or she is seen to enjoy teaching, learning, and assisting others. That is how Dr. Kigondu was able to say so much about his mentor. Mentors' approach to thoroughness and telling the truth and being truthful is a luring attitude and attribute the potential mentees. Mentors' ability to work and appear and make work simpler and worthwhile is a good attribute to potential mentees. Above all, mentors' visible success in research and scientific writing is an attribute for modeling others. How did all this mentoring and mentor start? Odysseus of Homer, who was the king of Athena, set out to go to war and had over 20 years away. He left behind a son old 1 year called Telemachus. His main worry as a king was how a young man he would leave behind would be cultured into the king's favor. Mr. Mentor took up Telemachus, the audacious son. After good 20 years or so, he came back. To his expectations, his son, whom he had not been with for over 20 years, left at the age of 1 year, manifested all the expectations of a prince and an heir to the kingship, to the kingdom. Henceforth, Mr. Mentor has lived to have his name used as a mentor. What is the current status of mentorship? Indeed, there's a wealth of literature in support of mentorship to successful scientific writing advancement. An early mentor references intend to produce a culture of scientific writing, but researcher to the highest type, men and women who will stimulate the youth for a particular country to devote their lives to the rising standards of scientific thinking. A mentor looks forward and has a larger altitude and latitude, not only for his mentees, but for his or her institution and the country at large. I'm happy to realize that this was the reflection of my classmate, Professor Ruth Ngwati. Against this background, mentors and boulders did not envision an ever-advancing technology, online social networking, multidisciplinary team-based approaches, outcome assessments, financial and regulatory challenges. It is true that contemporary scientific writer is expected to line up with the current gender and other social diversity of the population. It is expected now that a mentor should be aware of all this to a potential mentee so that a mentee can be coached to excel in a more rigid and a less homogeneous scientific writing culture. In other words, there's a lot more now, but one may tend to think can model them can mentor them, can lead them to where they need to be. However, a mentor's and a model's purpose is to have a culture in a specific way. And in this way, scientific writing. Clearly, when one looks at the available evidence, one sees that actually there's no random controlled trials for an ideal mentor or an ideal model. However, it is clear, and some of us are a living example, that mentored individuals are more likely to publish, follow initial career goals and intended goals, and enjoy greater career satisfaction. To the contrary, lack of a mentor is frequently cited as the greatest handicap to a coherent development in scientific writing. It is clear that mentorship and writing as a team help to gain self-efficacy, improve manuscripts, helps clarity of thought required in writing, and able to adapt to different perspectives in scientific process. It identifies the process being recommended to the writing mentors, discuss recommendations for forming a mentor, a mentee relationship. Developing mentoring relationship can start in many ways, but more often than not, starts casually. Starts casually from a common interest. Teachers, lecturers, role models are more likely to get a formalized mentorship relationship. However, right at the onset, there is need to the mentee to have very clear goals, priority finding, someone to help with scientific research, scientific writing, while achieving a work-life balance or overcoming aspects of obstacles. Equally important for the mentee is to appreciate how he or her own personal work style, strengths and weaknesses can enable the mentor and the relationship flourish. Generally, the mentor should be an individual who is certainly steps ahead where the mentee hopes to be. And in this respect, a mentor would be one with evident published scientific papers. A mentor should be approachable, available, enthusiastic, and above all, with good interpersonal skills. Other desirable attributes depend on the level of mentee's professional training and desired goals. Beginning by asking for specific pieces of advice and assessing whether the relationship is likely to be fruitful in the long term is more likely to be a successful mentor-mentee relationship. A personal fit is important because differences in values can sometimes undermine the mentoring relationship. Successful mentoring relationship have altruism and altruistic mentor who has both significant mentoring experience and extensive professional network. In other words, it is likely, therefore, that if you're a scientific writer, you are more likely to be a mentor and a model for scientific research and writing. Qualities of a successful relationship are certain attributes. One has to be flexible, honest, active listener, and have mutual respect and ready to get personal connection and having certain values for the mentee. When a mentee is looking for a mentor, mentee should familiarize with the potential mentor in many ways and not just look at one particular aspect. Should be able to evaluate a potential mentor's interaction during scientific meetings, conferences, forums, rounds, and meetings such as this. When selecting career mentors, one has to take consideration the potential mentor's reputation at national level, track records of former mentees, and areas of expertise and research opportunities the potential mentor is likely to take up with the mentee. It is possible that one may have more than one mentor because as professionals and human beings, sometimes it's difficult to find an individual with all the characteristics wanted by a mentee. A mentee will likely need to develop multiple mentoring relationships, and this is actually good for the department and also for the institution of the mentee and the mentor. It is true that most mentors tend to be workaholics in whichever way they are doing their work. However, they have one drawback, that their personal life may not be good for a mentee. Therefore, as such, mentors need not to be from one institution so as to have experience to the mentee of various other institutions, how they do their work, and combine with the life requirements. Choosing a mentor from outside the mentee's institution, as I've said, has many advantages, not only to the mentor, but also to the mentee and the institution at large. One of the attributes that would be needed is communication through writing. Communication through writing is a research process, and successful researchers spend quite an amount of time planning, drafting, revising complex forms of scientific writing. Experienced researchers may know that writing is not a way to communicate completed findings and polish arguments. Writing is a powerful form of putting the thinking and learning, and it's a way of clarifying thinking and make analysis and argument more precise. In other words, for one to be a good mentor in scientific writing, one needs also to be a very good communicator as well as a researcher, and communicate his or her thoughts, communicate his or her way of analyzing and putting across scientific, rational arguments more precisely. It is important that a successful mentor provides opportunity that encourages trainees to set high goals, their research writing, and to help them achieve such goals. Must, however, recognize that mentoring is a serious responsibility to motivate and help researchers attain training to become excellent writers. To be an experienced researcher, one needs to develop their career through writing proposals, and proposals can have several purposes: research proposals, conference abstracts, posters, papers to disseminate new knowledge, as my colleague has already alluded to. And such should be able to have influence, not only in research, but shape their own fields. They should be able to document research methods, findings, writing reviews of literature, writing reviews of colleagues' manuscripts, and writing letters of recommendation. Such a polished writer would no doubt be a role model as a scientific writer. However, there are always challenges in any aspect of relationship. Challenges may emerge in mentoring partnership due to cross-gender, cross-culture, language, disability of one form or the other, or generation, as well as experience. Mentoring in itself is a time-consuming and at times pose integrating schedules challenging, particularly these days of life pressures. Establishing meeting times and overcoming logistic obstacles such as transportation these days may cause strains in the mentoring process. However, rigorous screening for mentors results in a better matches and higher attendance rates. In addition, there are other ways of overcoming strains in mentoring and mentorship relationship. This will include both mentor and mentee training and ongoing support that are critical to a successful mentoring program. Regular supervision increases the success rate of the matches. In other words, there needs to be a body, a team, as in this case, the East African Medical Journal scientific branch that takes up the responsibility of offering supervision, ensuring mentor-mentee matching, ensuring success in the relationship. It is important that setting objectives to remain committed to the mentorship process is one way of overcoming strains. In conclusion, wanting to grow as a successful scientific writer, improve skills and chances of getting publications, I suggest entering into mentorship relationship. Once that is done, a mentor and mentee must work on writing down goals that are attained much faster and in a shorter time. Because if it takes longer, it may be overtaken by life events. More importantly, aim at developing a culture of scientific writing on manuscripts and other papers. Improve thoughts and writing all phases of the manuscript through mentoring and role model. Develop competencies in all aspects of scientific writing and have different perspectives and keep emerging trends in publishing and requirements in the mentorship relationship. I think these are my words. Let me again thank all of you, and more so the East Africa Medical Journal, for giving me the opportunity to put across the need to improve scientific writing through a relationship of mentor-mentee relationship. Thank you so much. I'll wait for the questions and clarifications when time comes. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much, Professor Wanda, for the mentorship talk. I'm here on the basis of mentorship from Dr. Kigondu. We also want to recognize the president of the Kenya Medical Association, who is one of our panelists, Dr. Were Onyino. If he has a word to say, we would like him to say something small. Okay, there seems to be a network issue on his side. So we want to welcome Professor Ombui, who is an associate professor and former chairman of the Department of Public Health, Pharmacology and Toxicology. He is a veterinarian by profession and registered by the Kenya Veterinary Board, an experienced lecturer of veterinary public health, food microbiology and biotechnology, food safety and hygiene. He has published 34 papers in referred journals. From his research activities, he has supervised a number of master's and PhD students and has participated in various local and international consultancy projects related to his areas of specialization. So we want to take all questions after the final talk by Professor Mbui. So Professor Mbui, kindly take the stage.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I don't know whether you can see my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see you.
Yeah. Let me also take this opportunity to thank East Africa Medical Journal for the invitation and the opportunity to present something to the upcoming writers. I picked a topic on scientific writing and be specifically preparing a journal manuscript for publication. Now, what is scientific writing? This is a technical form of writing that scientists do to communicate their research to other scientists. So it is not any form of writing. Now, the purpose of scientific writing is often to share original findings, to explain the significance of those findings. It is used to communicate methods that are used to produce the research findings. That is also, it is also used to communicate the the various processes that are undertaken to produce those results. Now, scientific writing should be concise and precise. It should aim to communicate scientific information in a concise and precise manner. And scientific writing is concise when it is brief and to the point. Now, concise writing employs only the words that are necessary to convey the meaning with accuracy and should be devoid of unnecessary or ambiguous words or phrases. Any flowery, ambiguous, wordy, and redundant language do not add value to the scientific knowledge being communicated. So when you are writing a scientific paper, all you need to do is to be more precise and accurate to the point. Now, scientific writing must be done in the context of other published work. Now, scientific writers must refer to published research findings from other scientists working in the same field. It's important to show points of departure or congruence for new findings, or the methodologies used, or the interpretation of the results from various authors. Now, references is necessary to refer the published work when you are writing your own scientific paper. Now, this also serves to motivate the writers for any future research. It also improves others' knowledge and expertise in the field. So when you refer other people's work, you identify gaps and you also identify what they did not say properly so that you have an opportunity to say it well. Now, regarding preparing a journal manuscript for publication. Now, what's a manuscript? This is a precursor now to the articles published in a scientific journal. A manuscript has not been published. This is one that you're preparing so that it can be published. Now, once it is published, it becomes an article of the journal. Now, this manuscript allows your work to become part and parcel of the body of scientific knowledge, and therefore it must be prepared well. Now, development of a manuscript involves the careful inclusion of all relevant information so that your research can be understood well and replicated by others. So the way you prepare the manuscript, you have to aim to be understood properly, whatever you are communicating. And the aim is for others to see the point and also the processes you undertook so that they can replicate your work. Now, scientific manuscript must adhere to a specific language of communicating results to the scientific community while adhering to ethical guidelines. Then I would like to look at the component of a journal manuscript. I must say that this is a general approach for most of the journals, including the East African Medical Journal. So a scientific article that is going to come out of the manuscript should have a title, should have an abstract, sometimes with keywords following the abstract, introduction, materials and methods, results, discussion, conclusion, acknowledgement, and a list of references. Now, these are the key components of a manuscript or an article that is published in a journal. Now, the length of manuscript, you don't have to write big reports. They usually limit the number of pages that your paper should be. But each and every component has its own length. And let's look at the ideal manuscript. An ideal length of a manuscript is around 25 to 40 pages, double spaced, including essential data only. Now, for the title, we expect that we have only a short and informative title comprising of 15 to 17 words. Anything more than that, I always find it very lengthy. The abstract should be about 1 paragraph, 250 words for most of the journals, or around there. Introduction usually is allowed one to 2 pages. That is double spaced. We are talking about a manuscript, not the article itself. Now, this manuscript is the one going to be an article. The article may have a smaller because of the compression of the fonts. Methods, 2 to 3 pages is allowed. Results, 6 to 8 pages. Discussion, 4 to 6 pages. Conclusion, 1 page, or 1 paragraph, I mean. Figures, we can have 6 to 8. You saw what the Professor Nduati was displaying for East African Medical Journal. That table, the pink table, was having the number of figures and tables. And then references, 20 to 50, depending on whether it is the original article or the review. Look at the journal's guide to authors for guidelines when you are preparing a manuscript. So each and every journal has its own standards, and therefore you can follow, but the general outlook of a manuscript is around what I've just displayed. Now, what are the steps to be followed to write a manuscript? Probably this is where the mentorship is now. Maybe I'm a mentor to some of you now. So you prepare the steps. You start by preparing figures and tables. We assume that you have already gone through the proposal and done the research, and the proposal was well crafted according to the standards. You have the data. Now you want to craft a paper for publication. So some of us, we think that you start preparing the figures and tables to summarize your data so that you can see what exactly you have. Then you try to polish up the methodology. You polish up the methodology, then go to the results, get the results that you have and summarize them as much as possible. Then draft a discussion that you want to go into the manuscript. You finalize the results and discussion before you start writing your introduction, and you then write a conclusion. That is, after you do the results and discussion, you write a conclusion, then you write your introduction. Now, as much as possible, the abstract should come the last thing to counter check that you have all that you have in the body, starting from the methodology.
The speakers, yeah, the speakers. Prof. Nduati spoke the first one.
Yeah.
alafu Prof. Mwanda. He spoke second, and then now this guy speaking now is
Prof. Jackson, I think you should go ahead. Eh?
All right. I thought somebody was interrupting. Thought he was talking to me, but it's not me.
Sorry for that interruption, Prof. I've muted them. Thank you. Continue.
Okay. So you write a conclusion after you finalize with the results and discussion. Then you try to draft your introduction, then an abstract, then the title. Now the title should come last. Now let's have a look at each of those steps. A figure, preparation of figures and tables. A figure is worth 1,000 words, hence the illustrations and tables that you intend to use in the manuscript. They should be done properly and be efficient in the presentation of your results. The data are the driving force of the paper. Therefore, the illustrations, the tables and figures present your data well. And that is why you should start by looking at that area. Then the difference between a table and a figure, tables usually give the actual experimental results, the actual data, while the figure usually try to compare whatever the data is talking about. An illustration should not duplicate the information described elsewhere in the manuscript. So once you have the information in the figure or the table, you should not labor on it when you are writing your results and discussion. That information should be well presented there in the table, and then it should not be repeated. If the repeat is necessary, then it should be as little as possible. Now, figures and table legends must be self-explanatory and short. Should be short and self-explanatory. That means they should say everything that you are displaying on the figures or the tables. Now, when you are writing the methodology, this entails a description of study area. You describe your study designs. You describe your subjects. Now, the setting, the analytical methods you used, the sampling, and so on. Then you also don't forget to mention the statistical techniques that you use when you are analyzing data. So that is very important, that your methodology also includes the statistical techniques that you used. Do not repeat the details of established methods. There are those methods that you are using in your data collection that are already reported and published by other authors. So you don't have to describe those methods. You instead give a summary, and then a summary of that method and a key reference for that. Now, if your paper is proposing a new method, then that has not been published, then you need to include detailed information on that so that other scientists can reproduce that experiment using your methodology. So your methodology becomes the first report, and therefore others will be able to quote that method, and therefore your methodology should be detailed in this case. All chemicals and reagents used must be identified, especially their names and their manufacturers. And do not use proprietary and identifiable compounds in your write-up. Now, writing of the results, only representative results from your research should be presented, including tables and figures. When you do a research, you normally have a lot of data, but a paper you want to write may not necessarily include all that you have as data. Therefore, you pick what is representative for the paper you want to write and leave the rest for maybe another paper. So the first sentence is there is saying that you, sorry. Now you pick data that is going to be important for that paper. And that is what we call representative results for that. These results you have picked should be essential for your discussion, and do not attempt to hide data that is very important for that paper. When you try to save on data, you may lose what you wanted to say, and therefore, sorry. You may lose what you wanted to say because you have left out important data. So when you are selecting the data you want to use, make sure you pick the most essential and complete data for that paper. Now, when you're writing results, you use subheadings to keep the results of the same type together. So you don't just write continuously without saying where you are, or you use only paragraphs. You should give subheadings so that somebody can follow what you are saying within maybe one subheading. So the subheadings should keep the information which is related in one paragraph or under one subheading. Number these subheadings or subsections for convenience and internal cross-referencing. For the data, you have to decide on a logical order that tells a clear story. So when you are writing, you should now say, okay, which part should I start with, so that it can tell you a clear story of your work, and therefore brings ease of understanding of your study. You must not include references in this section. What many people do is that they are writing results, and you find that they're also slipping in some of the discussions and references quoted there. So this is not a section for references nor discussion. Now, statistical rules is that you indicate the results of statistical tests used with all relevant parameters, like the mean, standard deviation or standard error, median, and so on and so forth. And you should also describe, give the results of those analyses. I'm assuming that during your proposal writing, you already described what statistical techniques you use and what they would be doing in your calculations. Therefore, now in this section, you give the results of those analyses, statistical analysis, in the results section. It's also not good to use percentages when you have very few samples, especially like now you have 3 or 2 samples, and then you say 1 out of 3, you give percentages, it doesn't look okay. That means the sample size is not correct. Writing a discussion, this is the most important section of a manuscript. Here is where you have the chance to sell your data. A huge number of manuscripts are rejected here because the discussion is weak. Now, the discussion should correspond with the results you have presented. So whatever you are discussing, it has to be informed by the results you are presenting. You have already presented in that section. Now, the research findings are compared with the published results. In this section is where you can bring in the other authors' view, their results, and check whether they are comparable to your results. And if they are not, you have to explain why there is some divergency, or if they are the same, you can also say why you think they are the same. So you make arguments across the board, comparing what other people have said about this field. Do not ignore work that disagree with your findings. When you have your findings totally different from what other people have said, do not ignore that. Make sure you confront it and convince the reader that yours is the correct one, or maybe you try to find out where they went wrong or where you went wrong yourself. You have to confront the disagreement at that point and convince readers that whatever, if yours is the one which you think was not right, then you say maybe there was a problem with the experimental design or the whatever. You have to give a reason as to why there is a difference in yours with the rest of the others. Now, to achieve good interpretations of your results, think how the results relate to the original question or objectives outlined in the introduction section. This introduction section, as much as you have not written it, you had a proposal which outlined the objectives of your study, and therefore you follow up and see whether the results relate to the questions or the objectives that were set out in the first place. Do the data support your hypothesis? Now, the hypothesis you made in the first place, is the data supporting it or not? Are your results consistent with what other investigators have reported? If not, you have to explain this. Discuss weaknesses and discrepancies that arise from your data vis-a-vis the other authors that you are referring to. If your results were unexpected, then explain why they are unexpected. Is there another way to interpret your results? Find out if it is your interpretation that is not correct, then is there another way they can be interpreted? What further research could be necessary to answer the questions to give the right results? Now, this is where mentorship is. You know, interpretation is not very easy for, especially the people who are starting to write. You can have good data, but the interpretation becomes a problem. Therefore, mentorship here becomes important as far as I know. So explain what is new without exaggerating. Now, this is where you want to show that you have contributed to science. Therefore, pick that what you think is new compared to what other people have been doing. What is your contribution to this area of study? Then write a clear conclusion. In some journals, this section is usually separate, while in other journals, it is the last paragraph where it is together with the discussion section. So in the subtopic of discussion, you, instead of having discussion alone, you have other journals having discussion and conclusion. Nevertheless, those are two distinct sections that must be dealt with as they are required. Your conclusion should be based on the specific objectives. Now, this is another area of mentorship. If you had the objectives, when you started doing your study, you want to know if those objectives have been answered with the results you have presented. Then if they have, then base your conclusions on those objectives. For example, if the first objective was to find the epidemiology of malaria in a certain region, did you find that preference, the preference of malaria in a certain age group? Did you actually find it? Then if you did, then your conclusion should be you give the preference of, you quote that preference as your final conclusion. Yeah. So the conclusions must be very precise and clear to the reader, and based on the objectives that were drawn during the proposal you used to do your study. Now, without a clear conclusion section, reviewers and readers will find it difficult to judge your work and whether it merits publication in any journal. So a common error in this section is repeating the abstract. So most people, instead of writing conclusion, they write the abstract. Is the abstract which they replicate, or just the experimental results. The results which you have given is what you are writing again as the conclusion, or trivial statements that are unacceptable in this section. So this section should be dealt with carefully, such that you don't need to replicate results. You don't need to replicate the abstract or any other section that is already there. So my take is that you use your objectives to make your conclusions as much as possible. Write a compelling introduction now. You need to introduce the research topic by highlighting research problem. Yeah, you see now, during your proposal writing, you also add an introduction. Most of the time, you can now pick that introduction you had during the proposal writing and see whether you can adopt it for the paper. And if not, then you can modify it to be in sync with your findings. Now, you have to, the introduction part is basically to give an overview of the research topic by highlighting the research problem also. You have to do existing solutions and the limitations to those problems, and what is known and what has not been done is highlighted under introduction. Then as you continue writing your introduction, then you cite a couple of original and important works that will support that work, including especially the recent review articles. So this is where you explain what people have done about this area and the gaps that are existing in that area, and why you started to pick, you picked on that area to research on, and what are then the aims of your study. This is all coming under introduction. Then you end by giving the objectives of that study within that same introduction. So the objectives of that study will be quoted under introduction. Do not cite so many references. You carefully pick the most important and relevant and current references to that section. Now, a good introduction should be able to answer the following questions. What is the problem to be solved? Are there any existing solutions? Which is the best solution? What is the main limitation? What do we hope to achieve in this study? So if you can answer that, then you conclude your introduction. So, and they say that this introduction should be around 2 pages, so one to 2 pages. Then you write an abstract. In most cases, you find people writing an abstract, but they don't know what to put in an abstract. An abstract comprises all the other sections of the article. You will have to have at least 1 or 2 sentences which gives an overview of the study. 1 or 2 sentences which gives an overview of the study. Then you have to summarize the methodology. You don't have to write everything, just an overview, 1 or 2 sentences of the methodology you used. You have to give a summary of your results, and 1 or 2 of a discussion. The most important discussion points that you have in your body, you have to put them there. And then you have to put a conclusion on that. So the abstract should be complete with all that is in the body of the manuscript. But there should be no references. Abstract must be kept as brief as possible. And my guide usually is that take 1 or 2 sentences that will summarize each of the sections of the article. Now check the guide for others, for the journal you want to publish, for the number of words that they want, and whether they require keywords. Then comes the title. Now the title, you may have started with the title, but now we want to conclude the title, which is now going out with all the information that you have already written. Now the title must be broad to explain what the paper is all about, but specific enough to represent and inform the contents of the paper. For example, if you have a study on microbiology, maybe bacterial, maybe you say the microbiology of goat milk, for example, but in the content, you only have done Listeria monocytogenes. So that title that is talking about the microbiology or the bacteriology of goat milk is not in sync with what you have inside the body, because the body is only talking about Listeria. So Listeria cannot cover the title, and therefore it has to be more specific. That title should be tailored to be more specific to Listeria and not general bacteriology. Now keep the title informative and concise, and it must be short. 15 words, 17 words is the most appropriate. You must avoid technical jargon and abbreviations. If possible, avoid titles that make no sense or fail to represent the subject matter adequately, or those that are too general. Now for keywords, they are usually used for indexing your paper. They are the label of the manuscript. When looking for keywords, avoid words with a broad meaning or words already included in the title. So the words that are already in the title should not come again as keywords. Only abbreviations firmly established in the field are eligible to be keywords. Avoid those that are not broadly used. And therefore, again, check the guide for the number of keywords admitted by the journal. Then you write acknowledgements. Here you can thank people who have contributed to the manuscript. For example, those providing technical help or assistance in writing the paper or proofreading the manuscript. It's also important to thank your funding agency here. Professor Ruth talked about the authorship, and the authorship was not including the funding agency. The funding agency like being acknowledged. And therefore, this is the area where you acknowledge. And in some donors, they will want you to acknowledge them and also quote the grant number reference that they gave the grant. So you include that. Before I go to this, there is also another area where most journals talk about ethical approval. Ethical approval is always a requirement in some channels, and therefore you need to also add a section of ethical approval, putting the number and the body that approves the study. Otherwise, if you don't put for some, it may be rejected. And then there's another section of what? Interests, the interest that you have on that paper, you have to state that you have no vested interest whatsoever. Therefore, you write on the journal that you are writing to. And then the references here is that you make a list of references cited in the text, all that you have quoted in the text, especially introduction and during the discussion. You will make a list of them and then make you give full details of the references under the reference section. In the text, you must cite all current and reference scientific publication on which your work is based. However, do not do not make too many. You're talking about inflating the manuscript with too many and especially old references. It doesn't make a better manuscript with too many references. Now, avoid self-citations, excessive. You may have papers that you have published yourself, but do not overuse them at the expense of other authors. And the excessive citation of application from the same region, for example. So if you're talking about Kenya, you find you are citing Kenyan references only. It's also not good for the journal. You need to get references from various areas. Make the reference lists and in-text citation conform strictly to the style of the journal. That was clearly dealt with by Professor Duarte, and I don't need to talk much about it. Otherwise, I think that's the last one. And thank you for listening, and thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts about this.
Thank you, Professor, for your presentation. I want to thank the other presenters also. We now are going to the section of Q&A. We had some questions that were asked by the attendees. We have one that was answered. Daniel Chelal asked, is the cost of publication and whether there is a mentorship program. And Dr. Obonyo has answered. I hope everyone can see. It's there in our Q&A section. So I'm seeing a question here that has not been answered, which is from Justice Simba, who is asking, thanks KM for organizing this event. One limitation I find with East Africa Medical Journal is the period prior to articles being freely available. This limits visibility. I have published several articles in the journal, but few citations compared to another sister journal in East Africa, where a related article from the same work has received good visibility. Is it possible to make it open access, even if this means we pay more? So I think someone from the East Africa Medical Journal can answer that question. I believe we have the East Africa Medical Journal chair with us. Yes. The convener, East Africa Medical Journal, or anyone
No,
who can answer that question. Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm dealing with technical issues about this text. Sorry about that. And I wasn't here a little bit earlier because I was dealing with other issues. But the issue of visibility is one of the things we are addressing in our new strategic plan. It is, can I say at this moment, it is work in progress. The journal has had a period of time that we were kind of not where we wanted to be because of ABC and D, but the new management is working on that. And thank you for pointing that out. Now that you've given me the floor, if you allow me to add on to the excellent presentation that has been given by Professor Mbui, 2 or 3 things. Number one is about labeling of graphics and tables and graphics. The journal has guidelines on where to put the labeling. Secondly, a common mistake I see writers doing is to present graphics of binary data. By and large, the purpose of a graphic is to enhance the results that you want to share with readers. So binary data are usually sufficiently covered by a simple narrative. When writers do that, they can save on space and keep within the requirements by the journal as per the journal guidelines. In terms of reporting statistics, the journal advises that that you consult, you ask for a review by a qualified statistician and you acknowledge them appropriately. I was happy to hear Professor Mbui talking about going back to the introduction and finding that you may need to readjust your introduction to be aligned to what has gone on in your paper. Very important that a paper is well aligned right from the title to the introduction, to the methodology, to the result, and to the conclusion and recommendations. A final advice I can give to young authors and just authors in general is that recommendations, other than being aligned to the title, shouldn't be too many. A good number, 3, maximum 3, 4, but oftentimes I find a whole list of recommendations. So these are just advice for good write-ups that have a good chance of being accepted. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that answer. Sorry, I didn't answer the first question. I assumed everyone had seen the answer. The first question was the cost of publication and whether there's a mentorship program. So Dr. Obonyo has answered that question, and the answer is the cost of publication in the East Africa Medical Journal is $100. And mentorship has largely been informal and driven by mentors, but they are working on developing a formal structure within KMA. So I hope I've been able to be clear to everyone?
Doris, may I
Yes.
respond to a question? There's a question about what do you do when you're rejected? How do you stay
Oh,
the
yes.
course?
Yes,
Um,
kindly.
Yes, this is one of the things I learned from one of my mentors, late Frank Plummer, and also Professor Dinya Chola. And they always emphasized, first of all, in writing a proposal for a grant, it's probably 1 in 10 that get funded. And today it's even less. And it's just important not to give up. Now, for the paper you're sending to a journal, I think first of all, identifying an appropriate journal. Look at what the journal is interested in. There's no point of sending, for example, a highly specialized field, say to the East African Medical Journal, which states clearly they're interested in the papers that have a more general authorship. So first of all, you're matching your proposed publication to the journal. The second is that story of read the instructions. Read the instructions on the journal, read the more general instructions that are offered by the publications of the ICJME, which is a platform for editors of medical journals, and follow the instructions. When you do that, you reduce the likelihood of your paper being rejected. And as you write your paper, your mentor is very important. Sometimes, especially when you've done your research study as part of an MEd program, by the time you're doing exams, you're completely exhausted, and maybe you've even fallen out with your supervisors. You know, you probably felt they were too difficult, or maybe they were not reading the articles back, reading and reviewing your work in time. You feel that they're keeping you, they have delayed your exit from the program. So there are all sorts of things that can go wrong between a researcher and their mentor. And so you may feel that that person is not supporting you very well. When you have your manuscript, you can ask another person to read it. And like I said earlier, asking somebody who's even just a general reader, an educated person who's not necessarily in the field, to read your work. When they read your work and they understand it, it's a very big step towards actually getting your work published. But please, it's important, don't give up. There is bias in publication, ever since the story of Black Lives Matter, now the new issues are rising that women writers are less likely to get published. That's quite common in the West. As a writer from the developed world is less likely to get published in certain journals. That used to be a big thing several years back, but I think it's gotten better. Some of the barriers has been how we write. You know, we speak English in East Africa, but we don't necessarily write the Queen's English, so to say. So getting somebody to help you with just the language, the crafting of your article so that it's grammatically correct and you're actually communicating the message well. When you invest time and effort on this, then you significantly increase the likelihood of your paper being published. The bias that used to be against researchers from the developed world has reduced dramatically. People have discovered that there are really smart individuals in this part of the world and that there's good research going on. And so more and more, our work is published in high-end journals, just like anybody else. And I think that whole, what we used to call a colonial mindset, you are judged by the English you speak, I think has moved on. It's no longer such a big deal. Yeah, thanks.
Can I just add something to Professor Nduati's comment? And the selection of where you send your write-up aligned to the interests of that journal and your topic is really important. In terms of a publication that has publisher, there is actually an opportunity to discuss with the writer if they can submit to another journal. That is an opportunity that is often not talked about, but it requires that discussion. And in East Africa Medical Journal, I think we are open to that opportunity. And this is also a call to fellow reviewers to make that consideration that, okay, it is not acceptable in our journal, but can we look at other journals that it can be accepted, and mentor the author to review it accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Okel, for the addition. So I also wanted to include some comments from participants. We have someone who said the talk on mentorship was mastery. I think he was referring to Professor Mwanda. Thanks, Professor Ndwati, Mwanda, and Ombui for those insightful and detailed presentations today morning. It's always a pleasure listening to my mentors and to learn. One of the challenges young researchers starting out face is dealing with rejection, and they give up easily. Doing research and publishing can be quite daunting for someone starting out. Could possibly make a comment on dealing with rejection and the importance of picking oneself up. I think Professor Ndwati covered that. Great engagement. Thank you, Professor Okeo. We have another comment from Rose. Mine is to thank the presenters and organizers. Presentations were clear, precise, and well summarized. Well selected panelists. And then the final comment is a very informative insight on mentorship and manuscript writing. Thank you to all the presenters. So I think now I can hand over to the convener to introduce the editor-in-chief, Dr. Yonga. Professor Okeo, I think you can introduce the...
I can introduce Dr. Yonga. Just a bit of background to that particular posting of the East African Medical Journal. The previous substantive editor-in-chief was Professor Lukoya Atuoli, who, due to pressure of work, resigned from that post. And the truth of the matter is we have not had time to replace him, but in the interim, the governors of Kenya Medical Association, who are the owners of the East African Medical Journal, requested that we look at our panel of reviewers. And during the last governing council meeting, we had agreed to seek out Dr. Yonga because of his training, his experience, and his passion to act in that post for the time being. And that is what Dr. Yonga has been doing. So that is the background. And let me then allow him to speak to us about his role at the East African Medical Journal since he took over, what he sees as some of the challenges and what are the opportunities, and what advice, because he's still fairly a young researcher, at least compared to me, that he can give encouragement to other young researchers in the participant list. Dr. Yonga, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Okeo, for that very lovely introduction. Unfortunately, I'm in a hospital setting, so I may not be able to switch on my video. But thank you so much for that introduction. I actually logged in just to listen to the very wonderful presentations. I didn't want to distort those fantastic presentations with my message. But really, I want to thank all the speakers for the very lovely presentations that have been made throughout the course of this webinar. I think for me, one of the things I'm very heavy on is mentorship and really making sure that we encourage as many people as possible, particularly our postgraduate residents, to publish with the East African Medical Journal. And really my role is to ensure that our journals come out in a very timely manner, to make sure that what is published is really quality science, and that what we publish really follows all the tenets that have been exposed in the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, that is the ICMGE that Professor Ndwati mentioned, and as well as making sure that really everything is done according to the proper structure. I think for me, the main challenge, as all other speakers have mentioned, is really the issue of not following instructions. I think that is very important. Authors really have to follow the instructions that have been mentioned as part of the guide to authorship. Because with that, really 20% of your work is done. As soon as you've read the instructions to authors, 20% of your work is done. And then now writing the scientific paper is really as what Professor Umbui has said. And I think according to when that is followed, really you reduce your chances of being rejected from publication in the journal. Of course, rejection is part of the game. I know, like myself, as Professor Okeo mentioned, I'm still very, very young in the game. But I think for the few papers I've published so far, about 5 or 6, one of them in the Lancet. One of the biggest things is that out of the 6, probably about another 40 were rejected. So that is really part of the game. But the issue is really picking yourself up, not being discouraged from publishing. As much as possible, when you get comments that may purposely say that you've been rejected by this journal, or you've been told to maybe correct certain steps, please pick yourself up in stride and follow some of those things through, because it's a learning experience, so to speak. And there's a lot of opportunity to publish in the East African Medical Journal. Just as Professor Okeo had said, some of us are still fairly young and fairly energetic. And so we have quite a bit of time to try and see how we can offer ourselves to drive the direction of the journal moving forward. And also really being very heavy on mentorship. As much as possible, we want to mentor as many people as possible to publish how to write abstracts, how to write a manuscript. And that is why initiatives like this are now being established within the East African Medical Journal, so that as much as possible, we try and educate our membership and our readership on how to write papers. So maybe those are the few words I would like to say. A very big thank you to all the presenters. And I must say, this is not the only opportunity. I think this is our 3rd or 4th session, and we will have many, many more moving forward, some of which, when the pandemic starts easing out, we may start doing some of them on site. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Yonga. I think there's a comment to you. The acting editor-in-chief is doing great. That's for you, Dr. Yonga. And the final comment is the presentations were great, comments quite encouraging. So I think with that, we have...
Can I just add one thing? Yeah, you're hearing me?
Yes.
Yeah, that comment is that for those who are listening in and are interested in writing and publishing, please have an ending communication with East African Medical Journal through the editorial assistant, Madam Miriam. She is, to my knowledge, it could be a case of not keeping that line of communication between writers and East African Medical Journal. Please communicate unendingly with editorial assistant. She's freely available at KMA headquarters. and even online, and she's even on telephone. I have not seen her rejecting anybody's call for conversation on writing and publishing. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for that.
Doris, may I make an observation? I want to appreciate Professor Atwoli. He actually rescued the journal from a very serious crisis. And I think as a journal, as a community of the East African medical journal, we truly should appreciate him. Our journal has been running since 1929. It's one of the oldest journals in the region, and it is good. It's good we are here where we are now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Professor Andwati, for that. I didn't know it was that old. So I think now we will allow the president of the Kenya Medical Association to join with the closing remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, first of all, to the organizers of the event, headed by Professor Okeo, Dr. Yonga, Dr. Nchafasto, and Mario, for these continued research clinics that you're having. And I think it's going to go a long way in encouraging doctors to do research and publish. As Professor Ndwati has noted, EMJ is one of our oldest journals, and I encourage all of us to publish their papers there, especially those who are postgraduate students like some of us. And I'm really happy to see most of the faculty from the to this important meeting, and I know that will encourage the mentorship of the upcoming young researchers. So thank you so much for taking time to the participants to participate in this webinar. As KMA, we are in the process of actually revamping EMJ, rebranding it and posting it under its own platform so that we encourage a real-time engagement with all the young researchers. On the mentorship aspect, we're working together with our Medical School Association of Kenya, REPUB and REPUBMed. We have identified there's a very active research community among the medical students that we are linking up with EMJ and under the leadership of Chafaso Bonyo in the Research and Ethics Committee, so that we can have these future scientists guided and mentored in contributing towards evidence-based medicine, which I think is something that we all are aware we been generated. So thank you so much, and to the organizers, I know we're going to just one KMA is in the process of starting an ethics and research committee in partnership with African Population Health and Research, APHRC, and we are doing this to encourage doctors to actually get into the research market more. Finally, I'd like to just make two announcements on behalf of KMA. One, there is the KMA annual general meeting for Nairobi, which is taking place today at 2 p.m. So we invite all the members to please spare time and attend. It will be a virtual meeting. For those members who haven't paid up, please join KMA so that we can continue doing these great research clinics and other initiatives that we need to do together as a fraternity. So I encourage all of you to join into the AGM for Nairobi today so that we can continue this good work. And finally, just an announcement about the passes. I know I've gotten a lot of calls about people asking about if the passes have been revoked. We are in touch with KMPDC. They're issuing a new pass, which you need to download. It will be an indicated public order number 2, so that you can continue serving and being able to move to your clinics. So please, by the end of the day, please download the new pass to replace the ones that are revoked. Otherwise, thank you so much. I wish all of you a good weekend, and make sure if you have not been vaccinated, please make time and go get vaccinated. Thank you. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Were, for the closing remarks. Once again, thank you to all the presenters for your wonderful presentations. I think they've been very helpful to all of us, especially those of us who are planning on writing papers one day. And with those few remarks, I think we will close this session. Yes. Thank you to everyone.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Good day, bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, thanks.